All right, welcome to another episode of the Generalists. I'm Michael Smith. I think introduced ourselves last time, Raz.
Hey, Razko Kotler. Great to be here again.
Yes, it is. And we have our special guest today, Parin Mehta. Thank you so much for coming. I think everybody probably knows you around here, but you've lived in England, Japan, USA, been in Singapore a while. People probably know you from Google, Airbnb, now Manala. I think we just want to dig in on the journey and learn from you. And I think it's a weird situation where we're asking you questions, but we know you're the question answer. So we're going to dig into Mr. Question Answer, CoachParin, and just, why you think that's a superpower. Let's start there. Welcome.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Same here.
How'd you get to Singapore?
How did I get to Singapore? So, I kind of grew up in the UK, went off to Japan for a couple of years after I left university, taught a bit of English, did a bit of judo, and just had a lot of free time there. And it was awesome because you could kind of see consumer internet really starting to take off, right? This was 2004. And I just figured this is going to be the center of the earth for consumer internet in 2004. So I went back to the UK and took a job in consulting, wasn't very good at it, didn't last very long, but then had an opportunity to join Google, which was right time, right place, but turned out to be a great decision. And the opportunity came to find myself back in Asia. And I'd always been wanting to do that. And then the question was where? And Singapore just felt like a very natural fit because I thought, if you can get kind of some experience working on India, some on China, and I get the odd trip back to Japan and then learn about some new countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam that I wasn't familiar with, this sounds like a really great place. So I thought, okay, I want to go there. How do I make that happen? And like most people who are mid-career and lost, I decided to go to business school to try and figure that out, and ended up coming to INSEAD in Singapore. And it was just a really interesting time because, and you'll know this, Smitty, right? A lot of stuff was just taking off around that time in 2011, 2012. In Singapore, the NRF scheme was set up.
Yeah, it feels like the frontier years.
It was. Yeah. And I just thought it was a very lucky time to be here and meet a lot of people. I think probably met you around that time.
Yeah, and I think I would love to even explain that because it's quite funny. So I was at Spool at the time. Yes. So an small Indian video OTT. And I recall that I was actually trying to get help from Google. And as you know, when you're a small kind of thing, it's all robots at that point. Somehow you reached out to me at the same time, which I thought it was about that you were the guy, but you were just like, I'm from Google. And I think I just kind of latched onto you because it was like a human that can help me with Google. But I think that's just turned into, years of knowing each other and taking walks together and getting a lot of advice from you and watching your career. But it all started with just, hey, I'm Parin from Google. And I was like, you probably didn't know at the time how desperate I was to get a hold of somebody from Google. So it's kind of cool that that's what kicked everything off.
Yeah, I think we all have stories of this, right? Like you get to meet people through serendipity and then you spend that time together and you get to know about each other and you learn from each other. And as long as you keep learning from each other, it just continues, right?
Yeah,
that's the beautiful thing. And I found Singapore's been incredible for that, certainly in the last 13 years I've been here, where you just meet a bunch of like-minded people who by design are here because they're looking for opportunity or they think there's something interesting to be done here. And then you surround yourselves with other people who are in the same boat and you can all help each other out.
Yeah, the density helps a lot.
100%.
Yeah,
that's it.
I think that's
you move so fast saying Google and like, okay, what happened in Google? Let's pause for a second, go back. Tell me, what did you do in Google?
Yeah, so the first thing I did, like many people who joined Google at that time, was you started off on the advertising team. And this was a time before YouTube, before Android, before Chrome. It was just AdWords, the search product. Spent a couple of years in that team, learned a lot. Learned in particular how to work in like very high performing teams. So I was part of a team where just a lot of like-minded people at the same time, same place, trying to get something done. And we were looking after a very big business at that time, which was selling advertising to financial services providers in the UK. So let's say someone's bidding for the keyword car insurance or credit card. We would work with those providers. So that was pre-2007, 2008. Obviously, that party kind of slowed down a little bit, 2007, 2008. And after that, I took on a role to work on what has now become the Google Cloud team, but at that time was Google Enterprise. And we were literally at that time going to companies around the world to convince them why they should use Gmail instead of another email provider. Did that for a couple of years and then had an opportunity to come out to Singapore. And at that time worked on the partnerships business, which is around the time I met Smitty. Which was really helping people with the Google ad stack. So DoubleClick, AdMob, any product they use for monetization and building their audience. And it was just a great time to be here, right? Because you had what we now call content creators, but that first set of people coming online with a point of view in different languages and looking for ways to monetize that business. And so I got to work with a lot of these companies that were coming up, trying to build an audience and helping them monetize that audience.
Yeah. And now I'm going to use a segue because you said different languages.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell everyone, I understand it today that you know Japanese.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's unique. I think it's important. And I want to understand more how it impacts your life personally and how it's was enhancement to your career, to the way you act. I don't know. Share where you have.
Yeah, I mean, God, there's so many places you can take this, right? Like, I think you meet a lot of people in Singapore who obviously speak multiple languages. I think, you can't really understand another person until you can communicate in their language, right? And so I think just that alone is enough incentive to learn any language, whatever language that is.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's just given me a window into a culture that I've always been interested in. And primarily I got interested in it through judo. But just after spending some time living there, you just start to learn more and more about different places. And I think additionally on top of that, once you can learn one language, you start to see the benefits of learning just a second language. Then you think, okay, why not another one from there? So that's certainly something that's been a lifelong passion. But specifically for Japanese, I think you meet a lot of people in Singapore who have a kind of an APAC role, right, in a company. And when you ask them what that means, they typically have a profile. So mine is, I've done some stuff in Southeast Asia. I've done some stuff in Australia. I'm ethnically Indian. I speak Japanese, and I know some good people in Korea who I could hire because I don't know anything about Korea, but I'm interested in K-pop, right? And then, so everyone has their version of that story. And I think it's just very, very powerful when you're leading these teams across different cultures, when people know that the leader or one of the team members can speak their own language, right? And kind of represent them in conversations where they might not be able to fully express themselves.
Yeah, and I think there's for me, so I speak Thai. I'm not going to say I'm amazing at it, but I speak it.
Enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Now I know.
Yeah, you didn't know that? It's funny. I was in Tian Brew Bakery. I was in Tian Brew Bakery today, and I heard the staff speaking Thai, which is a first for me. And I just immediately popped off like, oh, it's nice you're speaking Thai. And they looked at me like, where's that coming from? I'm like, the white guy over here. Yeah. But I think there's an interesting empathy switch, though, that gets clicked on when you struggle to learn a language, especially when you're in like a non-native English speaking area and you realize the struggle for them to learn your language, English, that I think that helps, right? And I think that's one of the things that's important on like a learning journey with language is you start to put yourself in their shoes for how difficult it is to actually do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. You guys have probably seen this, and you're in these big companies where English is the working language, and we're expecting people to spend most of the majority of their day convincing, influencing, and making hard decisions and communicating to big audiences in their second language. Or sometimes their third language, or sometimes their fourth language. And then there's a perception of, this person doesn't communicate well or influence well. And it's like, have you tried doing that in your second or third language? Because you would see quite how difficult that is. So I think that's always kind of stuck with me. And then I kind of think like, what could I do to help someone in that situation? Because I'm lucky I was born in the UK, right? Like I spoke it as my first language. Yeah. But how do you play these games in these environments where you just have this like slight disadvantage, right? Doesn't make sense.
For me, it sounds like it was your superpower. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I think.
Do you want to use it? Like nobody knows it. Like Clark Kent. Yeah. Using it only the time that it's gonna helpful for others. Yeah. That's the feeling I'm getting.
So to this day, my wife's kind of favorite party trick I do is getting on a train in Japan and speaking to someone in Japanese and just saying them crazy.
Like,
but actually,
which they probably don't expect it, right?
They don't. But there's a lot of foreigners now in Japan. Yeah, so I don't think it's as rare as it was maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's fun though. I would imagine. Yeah. So when you talked about leadership, so let's jump into big tech. So you worked at Google and Airbnb. Yeah. Without talking about those specific places or brands, what do you miss from your time at big tech? What don't you miss?
Yeah. So I miss, being in an environment where, so two things. One is founder-led companies are incredible places to learn, right? Because if you have a founder-led company with a very clear vision, that is very, very relevant to a lot of people, that's an amazingly powerful force, right? And so I found that both with Google and Airbnb, you didn't really have to explain what you did when you met people because they kind of got it. They're like, oh, everyone had a point of view. Everyone had, pretty much in every conversation, people would have product feedback or they'd have an experience they could talk about where they'd use the product. So I thought that was incredible. I thought some of the leverage you have on the impact of your work is pretty incredible, right? So if you're working on a product that has 1 billion users and you see that out in the world, that's pretty powerful, especially earlier in your career, because it gives you that confidence, right? It gives you a sense of, oh, wow, this is the scale that's potentially possible if I try. So that was pretty powerful. What I didn't enjoy wasn't necessarily to do with the companies, but I think as you get to a certain time in life, what your real values come out, right? And for me, something that's been quite important over the last few years is just this sense of freedom of time. And where am I really using my energy, and how can I have maximum impact? And part of that is a few reasons. One is having young kids. I had a health issue. I think COVID obviously was a big impact on all of us, but really starting to think through, every hour is scarce. It's perishable. How do I use it in the best possible way? And I found that beyond a certain point, just working in big companies wasn't serving the purpose that it did for me at an earlier chapter in my life. And so that's what I didn't necessarily enjoy towards the end. But no reflection on those two companies, right? That's just any big organization with more than 100 people, say.
Yeah, agreed.
I read something interesting yesterday. Bill Gates said, I should listen to Warren Buffett.
Right.
20 years ago. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen
this headline? He said, I got to expose to Warren Buffett's schedule maybe 15 years ago. And he said, you know how it looked like? I open his calendar and I see around 2 to 3 days empty. Of schedule. And then Warren Buffett said, one of the precious things in my life is time.
Time to think, yeah.
So if I have time to dedicate it to think, to develop, it's better to have another meeting and another meeting and another meeting. So just correlate to the thing that you said, I had no time. I had meetings and sometimes we need that one moment to take a step back and say, hey, maybe the world can look different.
Yeah, space is nice. Yeah.
You said COVID, and then I know, because I did some background together with Michael, share with me everything, that during COVID you've been in Airbnb.
Yes.
And 2 challenges. One, as a leader, in Airbnb, during COVID, it's a challenge itself. Yeah. And then from company perspective, product perspective, consumer perspective, and also from home perspective. How did you deal with that?
Yeah. To be honest, I'm still processing it, I think, even a few years later.
2 years on, 3 years on.
I think a lot happened. I think you take Airbnb, right? We got those first signals of COVID late February, early March. I remember specifically in China, Korea, then Italy, right? And this is a business which, the mission is bringing strangers together from around the world. And it was pretty clear that was no longer going to happen for most people because they couldn't physically move. And even if they could physically move, they probably didn't want to be around strangers.
Yeah.
So you have a company with a very strong mission that had found product market fit and had been growing, suddenly met with this crucible moment. And a couple of things happened, right? One is, there was just very big cost pressures on the business, right? And so we had to do a pretty big layoff across the company. Which I thought our CEO, Brian Chesky, handled amazingly.
I think it was the model maybe not even of the time, but just in general with the equipment, the time to look for work. I thought compared to what you see out of other places, it was wow, right?
That's right.
That was an amazing leadership moment, I think.
It was. Did we execute everything perfectly? No, there's always room to be better. But it was pretty good for given how quickly it happened. And the second thing is we went public at the end of that year. So you had basically 9 months where you experienced the very lows that a company could go through to, some of the highs that a company could go to. So a lot happened in a very short period of time. And then I think the other thing was just how do you keep a team united and engaged when frankly not much is happening, right? And particularly in Asia, it was very difficult because we all know that the COVID restrictions across this region were stricter than most other parts of the world. So a lot of the borders were shut. And this is a business that thrives on cross-border. So we had to just pivot very, very quickly. We had to pivot to a very much domestic-driven business in some countries where our brand was not particularly strong. And then secondly, we had to take some of these offline interactions between people, guests and hosts, and bring them online. And so one example was we had a business called Experiences, which we'd launched. And we, in the space of 6 or 7 days, pivoted that to be fully online. So over Zoom calls. And that was just it's just an incredible experience just to see that.
I did a cocktail one, I think.
What do you think?
I was at home and no, it was great.
Yeah.
Like, cause you just needed something to do, right? And it was getting so bad, but I had a lot of liquor and it was just like, I actually don't know how to use all of it well. And I saw on one of the experiences thing, cause you were running it, right? And I was like, oh, this cocktail making, sign up. Like it was Friday, like 5 p.m., which was great, right? But yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah. So look, I think it was a really challenging time for everyone, right? But I think one of the things I personally took away from it was the brain was just constantly engaged, but not necessarily being productive. And it's like the equivalent of when you're trying to drive a manual car and, you haven't got it in gear, but you've got the accelerator down and it's just whirring. It's making a loud noise, but it's not really doing anything. And I personally found just the ability to think clearly just went completely out the window. And so I had to really start thinking through how do you create a bit of space for yourself to think clearly. And this is important, right, when you're leading teams, because people are looking to the leader for some signal or for some sentiment about how things are going. And so you have to be able to compartmentalize where, the situation might not be going that well, but you want to give people a reason to be excited about some point unknown in the future.
Yeah. So I want to plant a seed here, but we're going to come back to it. But I think it's important because, correct me if I'm wrong, CoachParin came during that time, parts of it, because you're home and you're trying to figure out some of these problems. So I want to come back to that because we're going to talk a lot about it. But I want to say at that moment in time, that was one of the things that you kicked into gear. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
And I remember when it started.
I created a product I needed for myself.
Yeah, which was great. And I think there's a bunch of people that have these COVID stories of maybe things you started to do because you, I guess, had more time than you normally do because you were stuck at home, but you're also probably, like you said, worrying from this, not feeling great about things. So you jump into another area and focus on something. So that's where CoachParin came from. Let's come back to it later. I want to finish off kind of the big tech stuff. What's the thing you've just kind of learned the most when it comes to leadership? Because I see you externally as this amazing career of leadership, of different roles all across Asia. There's something you've learned from how to do that well. Again, not about the brand or about the individual roles, but if I pull back from that, what was the thing that helped you get better at that? And I just see this career arc of bigger roles, and then you stopped, which was by design, right? But what did you take away from all that as something that allowed you to be that successful in this region that you culturally describe as just very diverse, all these different languages, but you were sitting on top of it, managing many, many people?
Yeah, I'm still kind of also trying to figure out the answer to this question as well, particularly in the coaching, right? Because I'm coaching a lot of people in a similar position. I think there's a couple of things. I think at the very basic level, there's, I think, just a certain level of curiosity about other people that you either have or you don't have. And if you have it, it's great. It's very powerful because it just comes through naturally and you're just curious about what the other person is and what they want to be. And if you can string that together for big groups, it can be very powerful, right? Because you can basically help a lot of people get what they want from any given outcome or from any given system. So I kind of pride myself on being able to do that because I'm very curious about people, right? It's kind of, asking, we'll probably get to it in a minute, but in a certain time, I'll probably start turning the table here and start asking you guys questions.
I know a lot of this leads to you're going to ask questions, which is great, but yeah.
So I think that's one thing. And everyone has their kind of natural inclination to stuff. Mine is definitely just curiosity around people. It's just always been true, and I think it always will be. So I think that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, particularly in these big companies that are global, I think there's a role to be played to be a single voice of the region without oversimplifying it. And what I mean by that is we used to talk about this sum of the parts, right? So it's how do you articulate kind of a strategy or something that binds the region together, but also respect the fact that it's very many different countries with very many different cultures and languages. And if you're running a single business, it's unlikely that Japan and India will have something in common, but you need to be able to articulate a single story. And so I think having the ability to do that, simplify it and storytell it, both kind of internally within the company to any stakeholders and then externally to maybe the press or other stakeholders or policymakers, I think is quite an important skill that I see many people do well in this region.
And do you think that is unique to this area, that it kind of forces that? Or like how do you refine those skills? Because in some sense, when you're that person, you're de facto speaking on the behalf of a lot of people, although, they maybe have not anointed you as that person, but you kind of earn that respect and capability. Like, how did you nurture that? Because I don't think it comes naturally.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of these things are kind of a baptism of fire, right? You have to take often a very complex, complicated situation or system that has a lot of moving parts and figure out how do you simplify it to a point where other people can understand it, but not oversimplify it where you kind of don't do it justice as to the complexity. So I think that's just comes with practice. I think it just comes with trying it, failing it, getting the feedback, and then trying to sharpen
refining it. Yeah, because I don't think it's easy.
No.
Yeah.
Do you think you can take your entire experience? Let's imagine together, you can take all your know-how, put it in a data, and create your own product.
Yeah.
Do you think it can be done in the future? Because, now the talk, and I don't want to say it's been like 33 minutes, but I didn't say AI. Yeah? AI. Yeah? I had to. Do you think you can have like your augmented, like, bot that can assist you coaching?
Yeah. So we built it. And we built it maybe for a slightly different reason as to why other people are building these things. So part of the reason for me was two things. One was I do feel very passionate about this fact that a lot of the content around personal growth and development exists in English but doesn't exist in other languages. So I wanted to have something that could be universally used by anyone in their native language. Mm-hmm. And AI is just much better at doing that than me learning 50 languages. So that was the first reason. And then secondly is another form of accessibility, which is if these services are available in everyone's pocket for a very low cost, 24 hours a day, and never has a bad day, imagine how powerful that could be.
Super powerful.
Yeah, super powerful. So we built this coaching bot. Shout out to Gilbert, who helped me build it. And we basically uploaded all the content we've created over the last 3 years into this bot. And it's basically a coaching bot. So we'll throw out a prompt every week, and you can choose to engage in a discussion around it. And it will ask you a bunch of questions to help you refine your thinking. And it works in every language.
Is it an app? I can get it?
Yeah, it's on Telegram. It's on Facebook Messenger. I've tested it in Hebrew. Works great.
Okay.
So
wow.
I'll show it to you later.
Because Hebrew is
and
very
Thai.
tough. It's very
I think that the translation stuff is amazing with these new things. Like it cracks me up because I with the new ChatGPT 4.0, not 0, I've been asking it to ask me things and then asking me to speak back, and it's just like, almost, I won't say it's my own Duolingo, but in a very simple way, it's just I get it to prompt me to like get me to quiz me and things like. Great. Like, I'm sure it's not helping with my pronunciation or making me perfect, but it's reminding me how to like say certain things and quizzing me. And it's just part of ChatGPT. I think this language stuff is probably one of its sweet spots, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So many things that happen to you. I'm trying to, to centralize it. And for me, I was moving also for different jobs, different careers. I've been enterprise. I was building startups. And each time I have my disruption moments. Like, now it's the time to do something different.
Yeah. And how did you know? Because I'm very curious about these transitions. How did you know it's time to disrupt?
I start to have the 3 questions in my head. First of all, do I enjoy what I'm doing? First one. Second one, what I'm doing today, does it serve my future for what I want to do? Mm-hmm. But then I'm like a very strange creature. I know what I want to do.
Right.
Yeah. And this is like, I think, I don't want to say unique because it's like, I'm a creature. Yeah. Different. And the third one is, do I like the people that I'm working with?
Yeah.
Do I enjoy to be with them? And this is the 3 things. The money, it's like, it's coming after. Yeah. So, and when I start to think about it, I look at the environment and I say, is it a disruption moment? For technical people, they have always time to say, okay, where I'm located. Yeah. In this folder, I'm in the cloud, I'm in my local computer, where am I? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where am I? So I always ask myself after I have this question, where am I? Which space am I?
Yeah.
When I was relocating from Israel to Singapore less than a year ago, I had it. Where am I? Disruption moment.
Yeah.
When was your disruption moment when you chose to do a change and now do a venture building?
Yeah, look, I'll say something that probably sounds insightful now in hindsight, but it wasn't at the time. Which is, I really think, and look, it's an overused word, right? This idea of values, but let's reframe it to just like principles or a system you want to live by, right? And so in hindsight, I've learned what's truly important to me. And there's three things that really stand out. One is curiosity, second one is freedom, and third one is growth. And the fourth one is kind of peace and calmness, right? But just like generally doing goodwill things if you can. And so I never realized this until maybe a year or two ago that these things were important. But subconsciously, these things have kind of been guiding my direction, right? And we're nothing more scientific or insightful than often gut instinct. You just kind of know, right? Like if you take the time to think it through and ask yourself, what are you doing and why are you doing it? You can generally come to these answers, right? And people call this intuition, they call it gut instinct. I don't know. A lot of this makes sense to me now in hindsight because I've found some language that helps me describe it to myself. But often at the time, it was nothing more than just thinking, this probably doesn't feel right anymore. Or there's some element of push here and there's some element of pull here. So let's just make those two things work together and go with it.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think like part of this is you're doing some other things, right? So, and that I think it gets back to your time and giving yourself space. Because what I know you as is CoachParin. So how did that start? And what does this mean to you today? Because I know you put a tremendous amount of effort into this, both on the online stuff and personal coaching, coupled at the same time with, hey, I'm doing this venture building stuff. How does this look today, and how did you kick that off?
Yeah, so I'll start with how we kicked it off. So I've been coaching for a while. Again, I didn't know the word coaching. I just knew this as asking people questions to help them figure out what they're trying to do. I later came to learn that there was this thing called coaching, and then I got to experience it myself by being coached and found it very powerful. So I first started doing it when I was at Google. Went on and Google was amazing at that time for developing the teams. Like the amount of training was just, and the talent density for like in terms of other experienced people to learn from was crazy. So I got interested in this thing, saw a couple of good role models around me of people who I thought did this really well, and then just started practicing it on my teams. And I'm sure you guys have experienced this as well, but you reach a point in your career where you're leading teams where the people on your team know way more than you will ever know about the thing, right? So if you're running like a geographical business, and I'll use Korea again, I have no business telling the general manager in Korea how to run their business because I'm not going to be helpful at all. Yeah. But I can ask questions. I can ask questions to help figure out where is it you're trying to take this thing to, and how do we get there together, and what needs to be true for that to happen. So I just found naturally you get to a point where you can't actually be directive in your work. And your job as a leader is then to unleash the talent that you already have and let those people kind of be as effective as possible. So that was kind of a natural transition. And then I just thought, I really enjoy this. Like I really enjoy it. I can see it's having an impact. I can see people doing things they didn't think they were capable of doing it, and just started to take it more and more seriously. And then during COVID, I mentioned I completely lost this ability to think clearly. Like it's like the brain was in overdrive, but nothing really productive was happening. And so I just started thinking, okay, what do I need? I need some time to think. How do you get time to think? Well, you have to actually just physically carve out the time. And so I started thinking, what's a good prompt to think? It's to ask yourself a question. So every Sunday night, I just started a notepad and just started writing a question to myself, and then forced myself to write the answer to the question. And I found that really effective, particularly through some of the things I described earlier, right? We did this layoff, and we had a young baby in the house, and we were preparing for this IPO. And I found it very powerful. And so I just started sending it to a few friends. And they were like, this is great, but you probably shouldn't like email this to us just one-on-one. Like, there's probably a better way of doing this. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get to it later, or whatever. Yeah. And then that summer, Arno, who you know, Arno Bonson, he said, you should really productize this. Like you should really send this out to people. And so I just started doing that and created a newsletter, and it's just gone from there. And so pretty soon in the next few weeks, we'll hit 10,000 subscribers.
Yeah, congrats.
Which is wild, because there's like, I kind of envisage every week, I send it out typically Wednesday, Thursday evening. I envisage like this small concert hall or stadium of people receiving this thing. And I know they're engaged with it. Like the engage rates are very, very high. I get a lot of responses. So I think of like, so there's nearly 10,000 people in over 100 countries who are taking 10 minutes every week to sit down and think about a thing, which is, directionally, what am I doing here? What am I trying to get done? And how am I going to do it? And so, look, this can scale. Like, I want to reach 1 million people. That would be cool in every country of the world. And there might be a way to bond that group of people together as well.
If you want to like some people that might listen, they say, I want to be like you. I want to have like this newsletter with this stadium of people. What do you tell this lady, this man?
Yeah, just do it. Just get started, right? There is no way to theorize how to do these things. You just kind of start and you get on with it, and you mess up a few times and you send out things with typos. You send it on the wrong date. You get a bit of hate mail. It's fine. You just keep going. But you've got to have a very, very clear reason as to why you're doing it, because the biggest thing I've taken away from this is like, you can't do it for a few weeks and then disappear, right? And you guys are going to find the same with this podcast. Yes. You have to be consistent. You have to be very, very disciplined. You have to do it on the days you don't feel like sending anything out. You have to do it on the days where, you know, people are kind of mocking you and going, why are you wasting your time on this? You just have to do it. You have to have a reason for doing it. And so I've found it's become this ritual where, you know, I sit down every month and I'll think through a bunch of content and then get immense satisfaction from sending it out and getting the feedback.
So what I'm getting is not just, you know, thinking about it and send it. You made a preparation.
Yeah.
You're thinking about it, how it will be well received. There is thoughtful, you know, process.
There is, but I'll contradict myself as well by saying the number one customer or user of this thing is me. So even if no one else read it, it doesn't actually make any difference to me.
Which I think, like, so I think you and I have both gone to the same coaching course, like Go Master.
Yeah, shout out Geraldine.
Geraldine, you're going to get an invite. And now that I'm doing this here, that means you have to say yes. And it's, you know, I know some people go there because they're starting their coaching business. And some people are like, I'll be really transparent for myself. I went there for me because I needed it. Yep. Now, I didn't actually know that when you go and join a thing, that's actually the purpose, is you're your first coachee or something. And there were like a couple emotional days for me during some of that face-to-face stuff. And I'm like, I needed this. Now I'm having a hard time actually doing all the other work to get certified because it's mostly been for me. Is that still how you then think about it then? That you're just like, I need to do this for myself. Second order is it's helping me. Let me send it out to a lot of people. And then people are growing because of it. You know, is that still the motivation?
Yeah, 100%. It's like... it's brushing the teeth, right? You just got to do it every day. Like, these are routines you have to build to look after yourself. Yeah. And I found coaching is one of those powerful things. I mean, coaching is the first order thing, but the second order thing is really the time to self-reflect and the time to just constantly think through, like, why am I doing this? Where am I trying to get to? How is this helping or not helping?
Yeah, this comes up a lot of times I'm talking to people, and I know for you, like, you walk a lot. I think you're not drinking anymore. I know you're very disciplined with your time. There's this thing from Jocko, I think you know this one, discipline equals freedom. Does that ring a bell with you? Is that kind of how you think about it, even if you don't use those terms?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I just think there's so many friction points, right? That if you want to do something, you just got to figure out a way to get it done. And then by virtue, you've got to say no to a bunch of other stuff to do the thing you want to do. So yeah, like, there's just a lot of trade-offs, right? There's just a lot of trade-offs, and you have to just make them and then decide which ones you want to do and which ones you want to discuss.
You say no now more than ever?
I do. I mean, look, I would say a big personal weakness of mine is I've tended to be a people pleaser for many, many years. So kind of unlearning some of that behavior and just thinking through actually what's kind of, you know, what do I want to do? And then if I can do that well, I can actually be in better service of other people by doing that, which took me a while to figure out.
How did you figure it out?
So I had a pretty big health issue. I had a surgery on my spine, which was pretty dangerous, like a pretty big surgery I had to take. And so, yeah, just had to learn by the situation that presented itself to me. And so you get a lot of time to think and reflect and slow down in those moments, and decided, yeah, something needs to change here.
Still, you have your layers, I feel it. You have your layers that you don't want to peel out, yeah? So I'm thinking about, you know, a podcast called The Generalists.
Yeah.
Why? Because we both believe, not just us, yeah? There is lots of people that I think that believe the same, that in order to succeed in the thing that you do, yeah? Besides being a specialist in something, you need to have other skills, yeah? In different topics, in different places. Some people look at it as generalists, but inside yourself, you know that you are specialized in something that lead you to other things, and you can double click and you can triple click. what I understand from today's conversation, that your curiosity and your question are making it like very powerful tool for you as a kind of a generalist. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you tend to see, particularly in these big global companies, right, two groups of people. You see kind of know-it-alls and learn-it-alls, right? So know-it-alls they know everything. They have a very strong point of view on certain things. And that's actually very, very useful, right? They're otherwise known as domain experts. And you have some people who are learn-it-alls. They don't necessarily have depth in any one area, but you can guarantee they will quickly adapt when the situation changes itself. And I found just coming into consumer tech the last 10, 15 years, you have to adapt, right? Like, you know, whether it was cloud, then it was mobile, now it's AI, it'll be something else, right? And I just see too many people become too dogmatic and quickly irrelevant because they refuse to give up that kind of know-it-all position, and they are not willing to take on the learn-it-all position. And that can be as simple as putting your hand up and saying, I have no idea. I don't know the answer, right? I don't know yet. I will figure it out, but I don't know yet. And so, yeah, I think for me, I've tried to always take that kind of weakness of not knowing the answer to a strength, which is like, let me go figure it out. Or let me ask the right question. Or let me find the group of people who do know it and then give them a voice and enable them to have some impact with it.
Yeah. Good.
So we always like to ask the same questions of everybody in closing. And so first off, thank you for this discussion. I think I could honestly do this for a few more hours, but that probably isn't what everyone wants to see. But thanks for digging in and being personal about this and you know, sharing some knowledge. And I also want to say thank you for all the years of your advice and the walks. It's fantastic. So in closing, like you've talked about this a little bit, and you've learned a lot, and you're very different from when you were young. What would be the thing you would tell 20-year-old Parin that you know today, if you could do it through a megaphone through time?
Yeah, it would be something along the lines of what I mentioned earlier on, this idea of trusting your gut or intuition, which is difficult to do when you don't know that, or you don't have, you know, the data model doesn't have enough data, right? It hasn't done enough reps. But generally, even, you know, I see it in my children as well. If you trust your intuition, generally things will work out. So I wish I'd done that more. Yeah,
I think it's hard to think that that's possible when you're younger sometimes, because you have so many other signals coming in telling you almost not to, right?
Exactly.
But you're kind of saying, hey, overcorrect that. Go ahead and listen to yourself. It's okay, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. I also have a friend, and I keep saying, I feel in my intuition that this is the right decision. And he keeps saying to me, it's like, Raz, it's not your intuition speak anymore, it's your experience.
Yep.
And when you are getting grown up and getting experience, your intuition is actually tied with that, your experience. And then your decision either are right or wrong, but they are not always your intuition anymore. What do you do? You know, it looks like you have a very tight schedule that you chose what to do.
Yeah.
But what do you do for your wellness?
Yeah. So this has been a big focus for me. So a lot of walking, as Smitty mentioned.
Yeah, what's the step count for last year?
I try and hit about 5 million steps a year, which is just a good. There's a good forcing function.
I have 100,000 a month. So.
Okay. Yeah, so we're
going for what, 150?
Yeah, 100,000 a week.
Yeah,
we'll do it. We'll go for a walk. So that's a big piece. One, because I just enjoy one-on-one conversations. So that's a perfect way to do it. I box pretty much every morning, about 4 or 5 times a week. So that's great for mental as well, because you cannot think about anything else when you're boxing. And a lot of the kind of, you know, like I mentioned the newsletter, right? I'm like the number one customer of the newsletter. So I try and just find some space to sit down and think and try and take some distractions away. Those would be the three big things.
And the mental, do you do anything special for mental, or these other things drive you into your head anyway?
A lot of the walking with someone one-on-one or even by yourself is very helpful. Boxing's very helpful, right? The endorphins. I've been reading just a lot about the brain chemistry, right? The fact that kind of serotonin can wash over the body and endorphins can wash over the body, and the impact these things have.
Do you wish you would hit all this younger?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, who doesn't, right? This stuff.
No, I know.
I mean, it just compounds. You get it right. I mean, I've got some friends or people I've known from when I was younger who are competitive athletes who just built incredible habits at age 14, 15, which still see them through to 40, 50, 55, 60. And there's just this compounding effect, right?
Yeah. It's like investing.
Yeah, exactly. You try and start this at 45, 50, hard work.
It's hard. I'm glad, like, I'm trying, but I know what you mean. I try to tell my kids, like, it's easier when you're younger. You may not think to, like, get on this habit train.
Yeah.
But it's hard to convince them.
And, I'm not even talking about just exercising. I'm talking about, like, 8 or 9 hours sleep, drinking water, getting off the phone. These are
these
things.
little boring things
little boring things
are amazing.
And I think also about exercise. I saw an interesting interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
And the interviewer asked him, Arnold, do you still exercising?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, he asked him back, hey, do you still eat lunch?
Yeah.
And this is the thing.
Never stop.
Never stop.
Yeah.
Never
It's
stop.
brushing the teeth, right?
Yeah.
Do it twice a day, every day. Don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Share with us something that might be useful that you're watching, listening, reading that has been impactful for you that you think we'd want other people to know about it.
Yeah.
Can be for fun, educate, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
So I do consume a lot of content, particularly podcasts. I really enjoyed Founders by David Senra, where he just basically, not necessarily even a company founder, it could be just someone who founded an organization, but he really goes into long form depth around the person and what made them be the way they are. So I find that kind of content really interesting. And then just any good examples of storytelling, right? Like in COVID, I got into Korean dramas. I also watch Japanese dramas just to keep the language up. And then any kind of new language or culture I'm curious about, I'll typically start watching the dramas
TV
just to start
shows,
understand
okay.
about it. Yeah, so I have a kind of pattern, right? I'll start watching the dramas, then I'll plan a trip to that country.
Yeah.
Then I'll get to meet some people from that country. Then I'll start to try and learn the language. So I kind of go through the
I
cycle.
should send you a podcast in Hebrew.
Yeah, no, that's how I got interested in Israel, actually.
I have
and many other countries.
so many.
Yeah. So kind of any good examples of storytelling I generally love.
Got it. Awesome. Well, Parin, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
has been
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
It's fun to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.